Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Peel Halton Local Employment Planning Council's Small to Medium Enterprise, or SME Toolbox webinar series, episode 4. This episode is called Don't Be a Victim, What Every SMB Needs to Know About Cybersecurity. My name is Gail Jacqueline Rogerson, and I'm a communications specialist for the Peel Halton Local Employment Planning Council, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Before we get started, just a few things to note. We really want to hear from you, and we want to ensure that your questions are answered. So be sure to use the question and answer panel on the right side of your GoToWebinar screen. Post your questions there, and I'll be taking note of all of them, and hopefully we can get to all of them, and I'll be sure to bring those up as we go through the webinar. One final note, make sure your screen is maximized and expanded to maximum mode. I'd like to get started by introducing our feature presenters. Our first presenter is Susan Dineen. Susan Dineen is the co-founder and CEO of LEGACYNEXT Strategies. Susan is a business technologist and consultant with over 25 years of experience in assisting organizations achieve outstanding business performance through the innovative use of technology linked to business strategy. She works at the intersection of technology and people. And at LEGACYNEXT, she provides skill gap advisory services that focus on talent shortages and skill gaps. Her practice covers information in technology, cybersecurity, mainframe construction, manufacturing, and low carbon. Susan has held executive positions leading strategy, innovation, technology, marketing, new media, business development, and customer service. Susan is currently writing a book on tech skills gap, which will be available in late 2018. We have another member of our panel, Angela Platter. Angela is a high-energy strategic information security, IT security, auditing, compliance, and risk professional. She has over 10 years of experience in global high tech. She thrives on delivering creative solutions to business challenges and working on the front lines in delivering innovative cybersecurity programs. Currently, Angela serves as a project manager, cyber education initiatives with the Information Communication Technology Council of Canada, or ICTC. She is currently delivering the cyber education program at Cyber Titan competition. Prior to joining ICTC, Angela was program manager, information security and compliance at Python. Here, Angela led internal information security and auditing programs and ensure the highest level of compliance across the organization. Angela's innovative and intuitive thought process, technical skill set, and operational excellence has delivered successful products and services across a variety of large and small organizations. Our final panelist, Chris Henry, is a former CIO of Grant Thornton and currently Executive Director of Cybersecurity and Hospitality with Global Consulting Group. As head of the cybersecurity practice, Chris advises companies on hiring strategies and is responsible for recruiting, interviewing, and placing cybersecurity talent. With all that introduction, I'm going to hand it over to our lead panelist, Susan Dineen, who will be taking over to start today's presentation. Susan?
Good morning, Gail, and good morning, audience. We've got a very packed agenda this morning. I'm going to start off by talking about why cybersecurity now. Well, in 2017, as in the previous few years, cybersecurity incidents made the news on a regular basis. We heard about Equifax, Verizon, and Uber. We also heard about the Uber cover-up from the 2016 hack that got admitted in 2017. Well, the list goes on. And already in 2018, we've seen a huge row over the governance and usage of data on Facebook. So beneath these headlines, cyber incidents are a continuing background level of activity that is the inevitable result of organizations failing to monitor and to protect their networks. and of the users neglecting what we call basic security hygiene. So this presentation will take you through some of the practical things that you as an SMB can do today. So, should you be concerned as a small and medium business? Well, you need to be vigilant as a larger organization, because if there is no one monitoring your environment or performing your timely system updates and backups, effective security awareness programs, will you really have a business risk? And it's a common misconception that small and medium-sized businesses are not typical targets for cyber criminals. And this is simply not true. Cyber criminals know this and they exploit it. In fact, last year, one study says 69% of businesses with fewer than 50 employees, definitely in the small to medium range, reported that they were attacked in the past 12 months. And this was an increase of 9% over the 60% number that was reported in 2016. So how should businesses respond to this clear, present, and ever-evolving threat of a cyber attack? Completely locking down their IT systems is not an option, but neither is complacency. For many small businesses, the time and resources required to secure the perimeter and educate employees falls to the very bottom of the list. And we understand this. You're a small business. You have all kinds of priorities, but this leaves you vulnerable to attack. The fact is that cyber criminals are constantly searching the whole marketplace for areas of vulnerability. And they don't care if that opportunity presents itself in a small business or in a very large business. If there's an opening, they're going to go for it. And if you're a CEO, you need to understand that cybersecurity issues directly translate to cost and the risk to your business. And more are starting to understand the connection between employees and cybersecurity. So, how big is this problem? Do you really, as a small and medium business, need to be concerned about this? Well, the statistics are pretty staggering. As I mentioned before, 69% of businesses with fewer than 50 people are reporting that they were attacked within the last 12 months. In fact, this really hit home to me when a friend of mine called me and said that they had been involved in a ransomware attack. Luckily, they had a backup and they were able to get out of it and be back in business very quickly. But what that said is, whether you have 10 employees or whether you have 10,000 employees, these things are happening out there and you need to pay attention. So 54% of security events are caused by viruses and malware, and we're hearing about these all the time in the news. And 46% of security events are caused by careless or uninformed employees. Now, this is something that, as a small and medium business, you can take control over. What you might not know is that if you are hit with an attack, 50% of small businesses go out of business after the cybersecurity attack. And this is from the US Securities and Exchange Commission, 2017. That's a staggering number if you're attacked. So what is it costing? Well, on average, it's costing about $117,000 for a small and medium business with a data breach. And if it's taking you about a week to recover, they're putting an estimate of around $77,000 for a week to clean things up and get back in business. So why are you, as a small and medium business, a target? Well, number one, you often don't take cybersecurity seriously. You might not have a strong IT security specialist on your team. You may not even have an IT team. You may rely on an outside consultant or you may do it yourself. Often you don't have policies and procedures in place. Why? Because you're a small and medium business and you have other priorities. So you might also lack security training for your employees. Once again, you've got a lot of priorities you have to juggle. And lack of time to update security programs and endpoints, because once again, you've got to pick what you're going to work on. Or you could outsource your security. After a breach, SMBs frequently do not put security protocols in place. So even if you've suffered an attack, you may not take the time to actually pay attention and figure out what you need to do next. Hackers can stream money, employee details, customer data, and vendor information from their attacks on you. And they can also use the stolen information to stream from many other sources. So what does this mean? Well, I like to call it the perfect storm. You know it's coming, but you don't know when or in what direction you're going to be hit. You can do nothing and pretend the storm is not coming and it will pass you by, or you can understand the risk and do something about protecting your business. So 97% of organizations around the world are using cloud services, according to McAfee, and that's a 2018 statistic. And even these organizations where you might think, well, I'm on the cloud, I'm safe. 1 out of 4 of these organizations has experienced data theft from the public cloud. So these are real threats. So what's the overall impact to your business? You don't pay attention to this? Well, number one, there can be lost revenue. There can be loss of reputation with your employees, with your customers, with your vendors. Of course, you're going to lose data. You can lose productivity, and you've got a real risk of business continuity. As I mentioned earlier, 50% of small and medium businesses that are hit with these types of attacks find it very difficult to stay in business. And just to reinforce this one more time, last year, 69% of businesses with fewer than 50 employees reported that they were attacked in the last 12 months. So what happens if you don't have the talent that you need? Breaches go undetected. Incident response times increase. Malware can compromise the network. So staff cannot do their jobs and sales can be lost during an uncontrolled denial of a service attack. And these are all very negative things. And now I'm going to turn it over to Angela Platter. And Angela is a high-energy, strategic information security, IT, security auditing, and compliance professional. And she has over 10 years of global high-tech experience. And she is going to take you through some of the things that business leaders, CIOs, need to consider in small and medium business environments. Angela?
Thanks, Susan. Yep, thanks, Susan. Hello, everyone. Now that we've scared you, what we'd like to do is kind of walk you through some top tips that we can do to mitigate some of these risks when it comes to malware. One of the first things is that you need to be aware of the threats. And that's kind of what Susan did. She walked you through all the different things that could possibly happen. Because we know in security, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We know that when a breach happens, we have to go back at least 350 days because that's when the hackers have infiltrated our systems. So that's the first thing, is an awareness from a security perspective, from an IT perspective. And coming to this webinar means that you are aware of these threats and you are starting to address them. The next thing is to plan and enact policies. With these policies, it's your guiding principles. This is how you're going to be running your business. Now that you're aware, you need to look and see what needs to be done in your organization. You need to have these. There is no company that works without policies so that your staff and you know what you're doing. Just even password strengths, simple things, very, very simple things, so that you're all in line and know what you're doing. You need to understand the financial implications. You need to know what the value is of the data that you hold, so that you can assign how much security that you're going to be applying to that. If your data is not high value, you're obviously not going to be putting all kinds of firewalls and security around it. But the stuff that is very, very financially valuable, that's the kind of stuff that you're going to be locking up. And again, that's the stuff that those hackers are going to be going after, because they're hoping that you're not going to be locking that information up. Creating a culture of cybersecurity. Security is moving faster and faster and faster. I'm constantly reading LinkedIn, Twitter. I usually do about 2 hours of homework every night trying to keep on track of all this stuff. How am I supposed to expect my users to keep on top of this stuff if I'm having 2 hours of homework every night? So it's kind of permeating that information out to the users and getting them to understand how important security is, because it is a total company culture. Everybody is responsible for security. It comes from the top, it comes from the bottom. It is a company that is responsible for security. It is just not the IT office. They're a main proponent of it, but it takes an entire company to do this. And be prepared. Like I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So when you do have that framework in place of knowing the threats, knowing the financial implications, having that culture, and creating a security awareness program, that is setting up your framework so that you're not as surprised when it actually happens. So what can I give you for my top 5 cybersecurity tricks? Do an inventory of your data assets. This is specifically important if you're an SME that's doing anything for privacy regulations. You need to do this. You need to know what is your data and catalog it. Understand what's confidential, what's private, and you need to understand how much value is assigned with those data assets. And that will kind of give you a profile of how much security spending should be assigned to it. You need to do regular backups. That's something that when you have malware coming into your systems, you don't pay the malware. You don't pay what they're asking. You've got your backups, you retrieve them. Story that I heard, very funny, from an old professor was that he came in, and one of the things that he did is he came in to go into production and he found out that they didn't have backups. And way back then it was on 5 1/4, or 5.5 floppy disks. And he went, backed up all the systems, took it to the secretary and said, you need to put these away. These are my backups if the system ever goes down, the production system. She said, absolutely, I'll put it in the safe. And sure enough, production system went down, and he went and got the backup systems, put those 5.5 floppy disks in, and what does the system say? Media error. Takes the second disk out, puts it into the system, media error. None of the disks were good. And he thought, what the heck is going on? Here I've done my backups, I've done everything that I've done, supposed to do. So he has to rebuild the entire system. So he rebuilds it, does his backups again, takes it over to the secretary, and she can see that he's a little bit frazzled. He's worked the entire weekend building the system again. And he says, can you label these and put them back in the storage again? And here's our next backup, and hopefully we don't need it again. She said, sure, I will. And she put the label on it, and then she took it over to the typewriter, because remember, 5.5, this is like a long time ago. And he said she put it in the typewriter and went through the typewriter and started typing on these labels. And he just looked at her and he said, what are you doing? And she said, well, our process is anything that's thinner than a certain thickness, we use the typewriter to label the information. And he said at that time, he realized, first of all, you need to look at the users, the process. And he said the other thing too is always check your backups. So it was one of those funny stories that has always stuck with me, that when you do your backups, always check your backups and always make sure that your users understand kind of what the process is and make sure that they understand the technology. The other thing that you can do is set up password vaults so that you're not keeping them in different things. Psychotic is a fantastic program. I believe they still have a free program that you can use, and that way you can set up all your password vaults in there, and you don't have to worry about them being compromised. The other thing is, don't forget to patch. Vendors set out those patches because you need to patch your systems. Drupal was one that a lot of people use for systems. It took about 7 days before they started having a threat on that, and basically if you didn't patch, your systems were automatically compromised. So look at the patches, make sure you patch. Equifax was another one. They didn't patch. They were actually hit again too. And it affects everybody. Multi-factor authentication. It's just a good safeguard. It's easy to set up. It's one of those things that it just makes it harder for the hackers to get in. And another thing is something very simple is your physical security. And those are things that you can do where it's who has access to the server room. Everybody has that server room closet. Does everybody actually need that with their swipe cards? Tailgating. Somebody has the door open, they see somebody coming behind them. Tell them not to let anybody in unless they know who they are. And another thing is just make sure that there's plates on the actual door so that people can't jimmy the locks. A lot of things that are very simple to do when it comes to physical security. And there's no questions from the audience. Am I speaking too fast, or am I covering everything that you guys already know? Am I putting you to sleep? Okay, so top 3 education tips. So again, ensure that all users know and observe company security policies. If you ever want help with your security policies, I would look up an organization. They're called SANS, S-A-N-S. They have a lot of free information. One of the things I would do first is if you do want to poll your users and find out what their knowledge base is, they have a form that they can, it's like a toolbox that you can send out, and it basically asks them what their level of knowledge is. And that way you can establish a baseline of what your users know and don't know. And the other thing too is kind of try and identify with your users what's kind of happening in your space specific to you, and have it so that they understand how security applies to them, so that they understand how it will affect the business and how they are actually part of security. And the other thing too is you need to be able to tell them that they need to explain about incidents. So anytime that something doesn't feel right, doesn't look right, you need to be able to tell them to come to you and notify them about incidents. So scanning for vulnerabilities and looking for different components and applications and things like that. So, security awareness program specifically. Specifically, it's everyone should be part of your security awareness program. Nobody should be eliminated from this. Everybody needs to understand. Try and train users specific to their role. We had the email to the CEO asking for the wire transfer scan. And I know this has happened to quite a few people. There was actually specifically at a conference, there was a large organization that had been compromised through this. We had the same thing where the finance manager received an email from the CEO who was asking for a wire transfer. While he was on vacation, the finance manager sent the request to the accounting clerk. The accounting clerk sent the request back to the CEO asking for clarification because she didn't understand something. And the CEO responded that he didn't send the request. So we were lucky that time because there was some questions from the accounting clerk. It was a phishing scam. So all we did was we went into the headers of the emails and we were able to see that the company name had been spoofed. So what we did is we set up training for the accounting team so that they could look at the email headers to make sure that when something like that, anything suspicious, they could go into the email headers and check and then send it off to us. So it was kind of mitigating it and teaching them to find out how information can be spoofed. And it was, again, you're looking at social engineering. They looked at the CEO, they knew everybody from LinkedIn, they knew who to send the information to. The CEO's Facebook had been updated saying he was away on vacation. So all this kind of information, not only did we tell the accounting department about it, but it was part of our security and awareness program saying, look, at these people saw something, they said something, let's all learn from it. So it was part of our security awareness when we did our quarterly meetings saying, you know what, this is fantastic because now we know about it. So again, it was understanding our users' knowledge base. They didn't know how to look at the headers, and we trained them specifically. And a new term that everybody's using is the human intrusion protection system, because they are. They're part of your first defense. You can't be everywhere at every time. It takes an entire company to protect your systems, and that's what it will take. So over to you, Susan.
Thanks, Angela. Now I'm going to be introducing Chris Henry. Hi, Chris. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. So once again, Chris is a former CIO, Grant Thornton, and he's currently Executive Director of Cybersecurity and Hospitality with the Global Consulting Group. And as head of cybersecurity, Chris advises companies on hiring strategies and recruits, interviews, and helps organizations hire cybersecurity talent. So I'm just going to have a conversation with Chris so you can learn a little bit about what he does within his role and things that you can do as SMBs. So Chris, what options do SMBs have around hiring cybersecurity talent?
Well, there are many options, and when you're hiring cybersecurity talent, and I was doing it this morning, any role, especially in technology, when you're hiring, you want to look to ensure that they have a cybersecurity focus. So it's almost built in by design. So even if you're hiring a database administrator, you want to ensure that you're asking them about cybersecurity, what it means to them, and how they build that into their processes and their job that they're going to be doing for you. Also, there's a lot of different search engines, specialist like ours, specialist recruiting firms that focus on cybersecurity. Because what will happen is when you're looking for someone who's in cybersecurity, you're going to want to go to someone that understands it, knows it, and is connected to those people, and who's actively involved in the industry, because it is changing both at a granular and at a macro level all of the time. So those are some of the strategies. There's boards to look for, and typically I'll find with clients, they'll look themselves initially, but what I also find in small, medium business is, and I have some clients like this, is that they don't know what to look for in cybersecurity because it all looks good, or they're not sure who is better than the other. And plus they're looking also, which is important, for someone that fits into their culture. So a recruiter or someone familiar with cybersecurity is able to identify those people and present ones that could be a great fit for them, for their business, and also for the role.
Thanks, Chris. It's good information. So if you're an employer, how easy or difficult is it to find people with the right cybersecurity skills right now?
Well, right now, cybersecurity, typically you're going to have someone that's coming up through operations, which is why it's a 10 to 15% salary increase between someone that's been in operations to cybersecurity. You'll find it's difficult to find these people because they're in demand right now, and there will be a lot of people who have studied cybersecurity and have just come out of school,
Right.
And maybe they're working towards their CISA, CISM, or they're working through their CISSP certifications, but they need they need that work experience, and they need someone to validate their experience. That's why when you go for your CISSP, and I validated and stood up for people, they have to have a certain number of years experience, a type of experience. So you're going to be paying a bit more for someone like that. So you have to look at the size of your organization and scale it. And you're going to want to get the role description that fits your organization. And you'll have to make a decision how much you can afford. It could be that you can afford a junior or an intermediate security analyst or administrator, and then you bring on someone like myself or someone that you know in your industry or someone who's on your board to do oversight from a CISO perspective, or you have a third party that you hire to do some of your penetration testing and your spam email testing that you want to send into your team to see if they click on that email, and then give them feedback on that, to do your awareness testing and live testing. So it depends on your size, what you're looking for, what you can afford, and you might have a blend of 2 or 3 things so that you get everything that you need. Because if you get someone that's too senior, and depending on the size of your business and what you can afford, they may not have interest in that. So you have to sort of scale it correctly so that you have interested people facilitating it that are going to stay with you, but then you have the coverage and the oversight that you need as things change and as incidents occur, and you have to respond.
So what would you recommend in terms of the top tips for SMBs who want to hire cybersecurity talent?
I sort of said it in the last response, and I'll just repeat it, which is get the positioning correct so that you're covered from both compliance perspective. So you have to look at your compliance for your particular business and what you need to comply with. Do you take credit cards? Are you in public sector? Are you a mortgage company? Are you an insurance company? Do you have SIN numbers and emails? Because the more personal data information that you have and credit card information, which you really don't want to keep, the more rules that you have to follow and adhere to, and audits and testing. And so the perfect program that you can do is that you have someone internally that's not only going to help with some of the strategy, training, and awareness, but also they will do audits, implement policies. So you have to create a role description for that. And then you also have some oversight. And depending on your business, you might have to have a third party, or the number of credit card transactions you have. You might have to have a third party come and do an external audit too on your IT security key controls and your technology key controls, as well as your process and how you handle that sensitive information. So there's a little bit of an overlap with privacy. So the best practice is to structure all of that together so that you have a complete program rather than just, I'm just going to hire someone that knows it. They need to put that program together, and they're part of the program, and they help to facilitate it not only with the board of directors, but also with the key stakeholders. It needs to come and have buy-in, and that IT person is not going to send that email about awareness. That should come from the leadership always and be copied to them, and they should be directing the leadership on how to
That's a great point.
Implement this program, because it needs to come that direction.
Right. Well, those are very good points. And on that note, I am going to turn it back over to Angela, who's going to tell us a little bit about some of the exciting programs that she's involved with at the Information Communication Council of Canada. Angela?
Yeah, we're doing a lot here at ICTC. What we've got coming up soon is Cyber Titan. So what we've done is we've aligned with Cyber Patriot. It now has, it's a cyber defense challenge with the American Air Force. They've been doing this for quite a few years. 5,000 teams worldwide have signed up for this competition. What they do is they have finalists that go on to Washington, D.C. And what we do is this is the first year we've ever run it. We take the top 10 Canadian teams and they will be competing in a cyber defense challenge in Fredericton, New Brunswick on May 16th. So we're very excited because we're starting to get these kids coming in very brilliant, and these are the best of the best. And they'll be competing for this first national title in Canada. So it's very exciting. The other thing that we're doing is we're doing cyber education with educators in middle and secondary schools. And this is to help our schools build digital skills. So we're teaching them introduction to cybersecurity, cybersecurity essentials, and we're also doing CCNA routers with Cisco. So Cisco has helped us with this. And what we're doing is we're training these educators so that they can now bring it to the schools. Because there's not a lot of training when it comes to the education here in Canada to these specialized programs. And we've identified that this is something that we're going to need going forward. I'm sure Chris can tell you that there's a huge shortage when it comes to the cybersecurity workforce. We can't get these kids trained fast enough. We're huge skills gap. So that's what we're trying to do, is fill that skills gap.
And are you finding that the kids are excited about these opportunities?
They are. The kids, we've actually had, there's one high school out in Winnipeg, they're called Sisler High School. They've actually made it to the national competitions with Cyber Patriot, the US one. So they are very, very strong. It's one of those things that when you look at these skills that they have, you don't actually have to be a hardcore coder, programmer, cyber. What we're doing is we're looking at attributes for thought processes, and it's different. When you look at, we don't like to say the word hackers, but you look at their processes. So when you look at a kid that takes apart a toy, anybody can take apart a toy, but when they put it back together, they've understood, they've taken it apart, put it back together. But a hacker, that mentality, will put it back together, but then they'll see what else they can do with it now that they've taken it apart and put it back together. So it's a very different kind of thought process that these people are looking for when you're looking for cyber defense, because you have to outmaneuver these hackers because they're always thinking differently. So to me, very interesting. I could talk about it all day long. I love security. And Digital Dash, that's the other thing, is it's a new program. It's just up and starting. So they're doing Cyber Days. So again, it's that learning different thought patterns. So yeah, very exciting.
Excellent. Thank you, Angela.
Well,
I know that I'm on the Curriculum Advisory Committee for several community colleges. And one of the things that I have been encouraging them to do over the past year as new curriculum is developed is to think about security right from the get-go. So irregardless of what your role is going to be within the organization, whether you're a programmer or a coder, whether you're in operations, etc., you have some basic information about the importance of cybersecurity, so that when you're doing your job, when you're a graduate and out there in the workforce, you can think about these things and you'll be familiar with some of the basics around them. So this is definitely something that I'm hoping is going to be embraced more and more, because this is such an important area, particularly for SMBs. But as we've seen, large companies are not immune. It's the large ones that are going into the headlines, but it's everyone that's being affected. So just to conclude our seminar today, we've left you with some resources in case you want to delve into this deeper. So you've got any number of different links here to both Canadian and US publications that have general information that can help you put your planning and thinking together. And one of the things you need to know is that Ottawa has released a final version of their data breach notification regulation. So for small and medium businesses, you will be affected if you are covered by federal privacy law. If you are not covered by federal privacy law, then this does not affect you to the same degree. So what happens is that if there's a breach, it triggers for a notification. And the trigger for that is actually something they call real risk of significant harm, i.e. credit card information, social insurance, date of birth. Any of this information is attacked or sourced by a hacker, then you're going to need to report this. So what they define as harm is bodily harm, humiliation, damage of reputation or relationship, loss of employment, business or professional opportunities, financial loss, and identity theft. So there's quite a broad group of harms that fall under this new legislation that's coming. And this law will allow the Federal Privacy Commissioner to investigate whether organizations have taken reasonable steps to protect their data and have proper record keeping. And if they determine that you haven't, then you can actually have fines twice for the safeguarding of the data and for the proper record keeping. So that's interesting. And companies must notify their victims. So whether you're a small or you're a large organization, if you're affected by you come under the federal privacy laws, then you would need to notify victims. And for further information on what's happening in Canada and what the government is doing, you can refer to the Personal Information Protection and Electronics Document Act, or PIPEDA. And on that note, I would like to say thank you to my panelists and ask whether there is any questions from the audience.
Hi, everyone. Actually, yes, Susan, there were a couple of questions that came through, and if I could just pose them to our panel. One was from Christine. Christine uses third-party applications, and she wants to know what she can do to ensure the security of her client's information despite not having direct control over it.
Angela, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. So if you have a third party that's managing your data, the first thing I would do is ask them for an audited report. So what you want to do is, if they have an audited report, which they should, I would review it and make sure that it maps to the controls that you have. So if you have certain controls, say you have, Chris was talking about payment card information. So you want to make sure that if you were holding the payment card information, you had certain security controls, that they are following the same security controls. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Okay.
I have some more to add if I can.
Sure. Please.
Thanks. Hi, it's Chris. Yeah, cheers. Hi, it's Chris Henry. So yeah, when you're outsourcing to third party, especially third party applications, if you look at all of the regulations you have to comply to for your business, there's a few strategies you can do that will protect you in the future, as well as meet whatever regulations you have to follow. And so the ones that I usually follow is you need to figure out or have them tell you where the data is being stored, because that might be relevant, especially the type of data. There's some provincial rules where if you take a person's SIN number out of a province, you have to give them notice of that, and they have to sign off on it. That's the first one. So find out what the jurisdiction is. Second, as was suggested, you want to get them in the agreement, and then on an annual basis to give you an attestation letter or report stating what level of cybersecurity readiness they have, as well as testing. And also in doing that, depending upon the importance of the information, you'll want to be able to go and do an on-site audit of their physical security and of their building. If they have hosted your information in their own office, then you can also ask for the attestation letter for the data center that they either have or that they're hosted in, which will be another letter beyond their own letter typically, that talks about their policies and procedures and and other things that are being done from that. And that letter usually comes from a third party. They'll also hopefully be doing some internal testing, and they might have some security systems in place that are both at the physical, the transport, at the data, and at the system layers to protect that data. Another item that often isn't mentioned is there are some rules around people from other jurisdictions looking at data of Canadian citizens. So you'll want to find out if they're using any third parties who will have access to the data in that sort of a non-encrypted format that are in jurisdictions other than Canada. I've dealt with some countries where they had to have a separate instance that was hosted separately that no one else could see because only their nationals were allowed to view the data. All right. And so that's another important thing to check.
Thanks, Chris. Any other questions? Gail?
Hi there, can you hear me now?
Can?
Terrific, sorry about that. Yes, I have another question. I have someone who wants to know exactly what criteria should a small to medium business be looking for when they're sourcing third-party security management. Are there some specific things that they should be looking for? What's the best practice in terms of finding someone for somebody with a small to medium business?
Okay, Angela, do you want to jump in?
Might be on mute.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe we've lost Angela. Chris, do you want to give that a try?
Okay. Yeah. She just.
Oh, there she is.
Oh,
is she there?
I'm back in.
There she is. Yeah.
I just got back on.
Restart and I'll go.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure, no problem. I have somebody who wants to know what criteria a small to medium business should be looking for when sourcing third-party security management.
Again, it depends on what your risks are, your level of data. It really boils down to the data, the value of it, on what you're going to spend. It's how much money you have. Really, like, of course, you want to buy the most. You want to make sure that you have the most security that you possibly can because you want to mitigate as much risk. But you're going to want to buy the Lamborghini, but you're not going to have that much money. I understand what it's like to be a small business. I'm working in a nonprofit right now. We don't have a lot of money. So what you're going to do is look at something that can protect you, and make sure that your valuable assets are, protected as well as they can. Go out and get your quotes, and talk to the different security offerings and see what they can do. Sometimes you don't need that Lamborghini, but sometimes you do. It all depends. It's not a great answer, but sometimes cloud offerings, like if you spin it up to Amazon, it depends on what kind of environment you're into.
Right.
It's the other thing. Chris,
Right.
you might be better on this one.
Well, I think that your perspective of, even if you're a small, medium business, and what you suggested was you should have a risk profile for your entire business of what could cause an issue. And technology is one of those risks, the area of technology and privacy and access, because you need to use these things to work and create revenue, but also they have typically have holes in them. And then also people can click on things unknowingly, and then it causes an incident. So typically what I would suggest is you have a professional that knows the different layers and can assess your risk that you give them and the importance of things, that then creates and helps you, assists you, or gives you a guideline or a template to look for a security provider. Depending the amount that you need, then yes, you're going to look there's going to be an investment. And in fact, we haven't talked about it, but you can also get cyber insurance security now, and everyone's being asked that question by their insurance providers for business insurance. So that's coming. To answer the question more directly, if we look at the typical breaches that are occurring, it's coming, the attack vectors are coming through your users, your people. And so you want to have the basic security installed, such as firewalls and antivirus, anti-spam software, and you want to have those patched rigorously, including the servers, and make sure your vendors are doing the same. And then the next one would be the training, because if 80% of the attacks are coming through people unknowingly, it's really getting a handle on your devices that we spoke about before. Make sure that they are patched, you've got some security on top of those, and that your people are trained. There are about 18 different solutions that you could get, and you're not going to be able to afford them all, but you need to match the investment in time and effort with what you're buying and the level of risk that you have. And a huge area is in the people awareness and training side. And when you go to those providers, they're going to come with all these sort of solutions and things that are happening. The ones that simplify it the most cover many of the different layers, from physical all the way up to virtual security and proactiveness and response, and also training and awareness. Those are the ones where they have an entire package. That's what you want to go for. I've seen where someone will buy a point solution. They say, we've invested this much and we got this, but there's 17 other things to be concerned about. So you really want to find that one that you can afford, that gives you sort of a program, so that's in place. And then you also want to get cybersecurity insurance and do your backups. There's a straight answer for you.
That's awesome. Okay, well, that's it for the questions from the audience. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today's webinar. Susan, was there any last thoughts you wanted to add?
Well, I would just encourage all of our SMBs out there to take this threat seriously. It can have a big impact on your business. There are things that you can do that will not cost you a lot of money, and there are things that you need to plan for and budget for, as Chris and Angela have pointed out. But the best thing that you can do is you can take the time to really plan and think about your business and about your data assets and what's important to your business, what you can't live without, and plan around that and go for the best solution that meets your needs. And even if it grows over time, it's better than doing nothing. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We ask that you take just a few minutes to answer today's exit survey, which you should receive in a few short minutes, and just let us know what topics would be of interest to you in the future. Also, we'll be sending a follow-up email to let you know the on-demand status of today's webinar, so you can review any material you might have missed. We certainly covered a lot here. Or feel free to share with others who may have missed the webinar. For more local, relevant, and timely labor market information, and to learn more about the Talent Hub, an innovative, free-of-cost service which assists the hiring needs of employers like yourself, be sure to visit www.peelhaltonlepc.com. On behalf of myself, Susan, Angela, Chris, and the entire Peel Halton LEPC team, thank you so much again for joining us and taking the time to view our presentation. It was a pleasure spending this last hour with you, and I hope you have a great day. Bye, everyone.